welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you're doing well and are enjoying the podcast and the topics we've covered so far. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date. So today we are back with another review, another hot topic that is always bouncing around social media and the internet, and that is the keto diet. It often goes by the Atkins diet or the Banting diet, and they all sort of fall under the umbrella of very high fat diets, low carbohydrate diets, where people promise really quick results, and we'll sort of delve into the pros and cons of it, some of the myths, and my personal experience, as this is something that I have done in the past a few times and have found, well, potentially some interesting findings for you as well. So what is the keto diet? So there's no actual firm definition of what actually is a low carbohydrate diet, but often the number of 100 grams of carbohydrates or less per day is seen as a low carbohydrate. Some people might go really strict, some people might go less than 50, but it's seen as a really effective way to lose weight and improve health markers. So first of all, losing weight, it's not more effective than a low fat approach or calorie controlled diets, as long as calories and protein are matched. The initial weight loss that people see usually on a low carbohydrate diet is due to water loss and reduced glycogen stores, which we've spoken about in previous episodes, which sort of give a really good metric loss on the scales, which doesn't result in any long-term benefits or long-term increased fat loss. And often when people start eating normally again, they regain that couple of kilos that they lost of water weight just from their glycogen stores being replenished as well. So it's no more effective for weight loss long term. But why do people do it? So when I did it, I was foolishly told, it's before I studied nutrition and before I went to university, that it was the way to lose weight. There was two people who were wrongly highly respected in the areas that I was living and working at the time. Had them come in, and we were sort of given, this was when I was a rugby player as well, he was come in and telling us that carbohydrates are bad. And whilst now it's really foolish in the general population to say that, it's even more foolish to believe that a rugby player doesn't need carbohydrates whatsoever. And might even say it's even more and more foolish as someone who was in my position, which was a prop in rugby, who needs a bit of extra weight, as probably needs to be about 115, 120 kilos in my position, to be put on a ketogenic diet, because carbohydrates help with high intensity training and performance. And whilst, yes, we might get a bit leaner training performance, people who did low carb diets and ketogenic diets, Atkins diets, those sorts of things plummeted. And also things like people just feeling really dizzy, lack of or low cognitive sort of function, brain fog, poor recovery, and it's just not a recipe for someone who's trying to perform at their best. So I've done it a few times since then, and then since I've become more aware of it, there are some potential benefits to it, which I'll go through now. So the benefits of a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet is pretty easy to follow. You just don't have any sort of carbohydrates in your diet. It's fairly bland, so actually you tend to find that you don't actually look forward to your meals very much, because it's usually just protein. And even having a high amount of protein in this, if you're traditionally looking at this dietary approach, is frowned upon, because high amount of protein it sort of gets converted into glucose in the body. Your body doesn't produce ketones, which sort of gives the name of the diet the ketone diet, and they want you to be in ketosis, which is where your brain is using fat as its primary fuel, when that's not really ever important. And actually that's why it takes a couple of days to get into ketosis, because fatty acids can't go across the blood-brain barrier. So once that happens, your body can run on fat as a primary fuel source. It doesn't mean that it's optimal, doesn't mean it's beneficial, doesn't mean it's any better. Just that's what they're measured by, and you'll get keto sticks that you wee on that shows you that you're in ketosis or not. Anyway, so the pros, as I said, pretty straightforward. You tend to actually lose weight because you get the water weight loss in the first couple of days, but also you don't really look forward to your meals after a while. It's quite a boring diet. You tend, whilst you're wanting carbohydrate foods because you're not having them, you tend to really not finish your meals, which means that you're taking in quite a few calories. So you can actually lose quite a lot of weight quite effectively. Would I recommend it? Probably not for the vast majority of people. It's not something that I would like to do again, because you can achieve just as good results more sustainably, including carbohydrates in your diet. So that sort of covers the myth-busting element around, is it more beneficial for weight loss? In short, no. People will have all these sort of suggestions that how it might be beneficial, but there are no, in regards to outcomes, looking at reviews, looking at meta-analysis, it doesn't come out on top at all. It's similar as long as calories are matched. Next up, people talk about the health benefits of the keto diet, which I always find quite interesting, because whilst we're going low carbohydrate, high fat foods or moderate fat foods that you have in your diet, the quality of your diet can vary massively. So it's not one that I'd advise, not one that I'd sort of suggest for people to sort of do personally, and we know it's quite popular and famous over the years with the Atkins and things like that. But there are things that are really important in carbohydrates. So a traditionally strict carbohydrate ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate, can limit nutrients such as fiber, vitamins and minerals, because obviously we're not having many fruits and vegetables. We're obviously going to be feeling a bit sluggish because we're not having many carbohydrates into our diet. And if you're going to do it properly, I'd probably suggest having some form of medical supervision, some tests and getting it signed off by a dietitian in particular, because it's just, there's so many caveats to it and it can be done very, very wrong. And what do I mean by that? So with the ketogenic diet long term, whilst it can help with people with their weight loss potentially, if that's their preference, depending on the quality of the diet, they're probably going to have an increase in saturated fat intake within their diet. Red meat, which isn't necessarily bad, but if you're having a lot of saturated fat from animal sources, it can increase your LDL, which is what we call, quote unquote, your bad cholesterol, which puts you at a higher risk of potential cardiovascular disease. We know CVD, cardiovascular disease, is the biggest killer across the board worldwide. So putting yourself at a higher risk of that through this dietary change, whilst also decreasing your fiber intake, your potential vitamin mineral intake, and also your diet satisfaction. There's lots of probably downsides to this that I think aren't worth the small and limited upsides to it. So again, another reason why I wouldn't recommend it. Good option for diabetics is another sort of often talking point, and it can be risky for people with diabetes. Again, medical supervision is something that I'd obviously advise. I wouldn't suggest that people cut out carbohydrates in their diet, especially if they see that they're going to feel like they're going to eat them long term, because rather than cutting them out and then trying to reintroduce them and develop a positive relationship with them long term, actually, why not work on that now and build a more sustainable approach to carbohydrates? And we know that actually carbohydrates aren't the things that cause diabetes. They're not the things that are going to make your diabetes worse. It's your diet as a whole plus your lifestyle as a whole. We know people can have high carbohydrate diet intakes, can have high fruit and veg intake within their diet, who are diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and lose weight and improve their blood sugars, but also put their into remission as well. So carbohydrates isn't the limiting factor for people with diabetes, so there's no need to go on a ketogenic diet, from my opinion. So again, not something that I'd sort of advise people. And then something that I don't feel like I've sort of touched on quite a lot already and done previously an episode on it, but usually this comes from people who take this diet from a position of fear of carbohydrates, fear of bread, fear of pasta, all these processed foods that are high in carbohydrates and are really bad for you. And actually, that's not the case at all. We know that there are a lot of carbohydrate sources hugely healthful in regards to their vitamin and mineral content, their fiber content, and actually are encouraged within a healthy and balanced diet. Again, it is all about the balance, hence the name Balanced Approach Podcast. We need to find the balance for you. So if you want to have a balanced relationship with food, if you want to have a positive relationship with food, I'd probably sort of steer clear of this diet because it's quite restrictive. And we know, for example, that people sort of show disordered eating behaviors, where that's all or nothing approach, that binging sort of mentality, in situations where they're told they can't have food. So particular populations, sort of myself, someone who's gluten-free or a celiac, someone who is a type 1 diabetic who are told they shouldn't have certain foods, and health practitioners have told them they can't have certain foods, or someone with polycystic ovarian syndrome, because there are certain restrictions that are placed upon that person. Those people tend to have a higher incidence of disordered eating, and I think eating disorders, but I can't remember if that was the full statistic. But I know disordered eating habits, so people tend to have a poor relationship with food, especially foods that they're told that they can't have, such as carbohydrates. So like I said, for me, I don't think there's any reason for people to completely avoid carbohydrates. There might be certain instances where we get people to manage their carbohydrate intake a little bit better. We might look at the quality of sources, or the frequency, or the portion amounts that they're having of certain carbohydrates, how those carbohydrates are cooked, and looking at improving the diet. But carbohydrates are a fantastic part of a diet. Just like I probably wouldn't advise people to go on a particularly low-fat diet, because we know that fats play a crucial role as well. So from my side, there is not much to say around my personal experience, around the research, around what I've experienced with clients. There's not much really on the side of saying people should try a ketogenic diet. There are not many instances where I would recommend it to people, only potentially people who might have issues with their insulin sensitivity or insulin resistant. We might sort of lower their carbohydrates or have a look at certain carbohydrates. But again, I wouldn't go strict to say that cut them out, because I think it's quite hard to have a balanced and healthy diet whilst doing ketogenic. It's not impossible. Definitely say it wouldn't be impossible, but it'd be quite tricky to manage and monitor. If you are looking to try a new diet and keto is on the cards, I'd sort of say explore other options potentially. We know that diets that are quite high in polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats, such as the Mediterranean diet, can be really beneficial to overall health and have lots of health benefits with regards to cardiovascular disease. But also that diet includes a lot of legumes, lots of carbohydrates in there, a good amount of protein, but there's lots of elements that we know play a role within potentially the healthiness of that diet. And as always, there is no one size fits all approach. Hopefully, if you've tried the ketogenic diet in the past and you've sort of maybe it's clarified a few things that you might have felt at the time, or connected some dots for you. If it's something you're considering, then it might have given you a bit more food for thought. And if it's something that you've disregarded and you thought, well, it's not for me, then it might have reaffirmed whether this diet is for you. But I just thought it'd be worthwhile overviewing such a popular diet that I often see spoken about online, and hopefully has given you a bit more of a balanced approach to the ketogenic diet. So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all other social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, click the link below and inquire about working with me. Remember to subscribe to the Balanced Approach podcast wherever you're listening for more insightful episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.